Listen to that just for a second.
Oh, the clock.
Yeah, that rhythmic kind of grounding tick of the antique grandfather clock right there in the corner. And if you take a deep breath in, you can actually smell it. That rich, really comforting scent of roasted coffee blending with the dust of all these old letter-bound books.
It really is the perfect atmosphere.
It is. So go ahead and pull up a chair to the table with us. Welcome back to Cafe Karma International. Our mission today is laser focused. We are looking exclusively at the earthly and, the psychological manifestation of Jyeshtha, which is universally known in the texts as the eldest star.
Right, the 18th Nakshatra.
Exactly. And we have a pretty formidable stack of sources spread out in front of us right now. We're pulling from classical planetary texts, some really intense mythological narratives surrounding the sovereign deity Indra, and some deeply revealing psychological analyses of the Jyeshtha archetype itself.
And honestly, the environment in here really is the perfect container for this material today. Because to understand the eldest star, you need a calm, almost surgical focus. I mean, we are basically looking at a set of ancient blueprints that map out the mechanics of the human mind.
Yeah, mapping out the really heavy burdens of leadership.
Exactly. And how this incredibly high voltage cosmic energy actually grounds itself into the daily, very messy reality of human life.
Right, so to see how Jyeshtha functions here on Earth, we really need to look at its structural sublayers first. The texts refer to these as the four padas, or quarters, and you can kind of think of these padas as four distinct operating systems.
That's a great way to put it. They act as filters, taking this massive archetype of the eldest and giving it a specific flavor. It dictates exactly where a person is going to direct their life focus.
Okay, so let's break them down. The first pada is heavily influenced by Aries and Mars, and our sources describe this layer as the pioneering commander.
Yeah, and it is an incredibly mobilized, ambitious energy. When Jyeshtha filters through Mars, you get this dynamic courage that is just permanently dressed for battle.
Right.
But because it is so heavily martial, this operating system is highly prone to impulsive action. I mean, these are the commanders who feel the absolute necessity to lead the charge. But they might, order their troops to take the hill before the reconnaissance data has even come in.
Because the drive to assert their sovereignty just totally overrides the need for caution.
Exactly. They have this massive engine, but they haven't quite installed the brakes yet.
Which makes the shift to the second pada so fascinating to look at because it throws that energy into a completely different gear. So the second quarter is influenced by Taurus and Venus, and the texts frame this one as the practical stabilizer.
Right, so that fiery impulsiveness of Mars cools down here. It hardens into something deeply grounded and much more persistent. The life focus in this Taurus layer is entirely centered on material comfort, the accumulation of wealth, and just having the sheer physical endurance to build lasting security.
So for this native, being the eldest means possessing tangible assets.
Absolutely. They protect their kingdom by making it financially and materially impenetrable. They view, like, a robust investment portfolio or a massive real estate holding the exact same way a medieval king views a fortress wall with a moat.
It's all about creating a reality where no one can ever leverage them.
Exactly.
Which is a brilliant defense mechanism, honestly. But if we move into the third pada, that defense mechanism shifts away from the physical world and entirely into the mental world. So this quarter operates under the influence of Gemini and Mercury. The sources call this the articulate researcher.
Right, so here the drive to maintain control and guard the throne moves into the intellect, and it becomes a highly weaponized mind. These individuals are driven by just a voracious curiosity.
They excel in strategy, communication, deep dive research.
Yeah, they're playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else is playing checkers. But the shadow side of this endlessly active intellect is the severe toll it takes on the nervous system.
Right, because the articulate researcher can so easily spiral into crippling overthinking.
They are constantly trying to outthink every possible threat, running threat assessments on completely mundane interactions, trying to anticipate a betrayal that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah, if you've ever found yourself lying awake at 3 a.m., meticulously dissecting a 2-word email from your boss, trying to decode some hidden agenda, you are tapping into that exact Gemini Jyeshtha frequency.
Totally.
And that level of mental exhaustion perfectly sets up the intensity of the final quarter. The fourth pada is influenced by Cancer and the Moon. And according to the texts, this sits at a highly volatile, highly dangerous edge known as the Gandanta.
Right. The Gandanta is the spiritual knot where the element of water meets the element of fire. And if you think about that chemically, water and fire do not mix smoothly.
No, they create scalding steam.
Exactly. It is an extremely turbulent, boiling transition point.
Right.
So this fourth pada produces what the sources call the emotional combatant. It's a profound, almost painful blend of nurturing compassion mixed with a really heavy burden of emotional overload.
Because it's ruled by the moon.
Right. So they possess acute psychic sensitivity. They feel everything in their environment. And because they carry the archetype of the eldest, they feel a crushing responsibility to protect everyone they love. It's beautiful but deeply exhausting combination to live with.
It really is. And to really grasp what it feels like inside the mind of someone carrying this Jyeshtha energy, regardless of which of those four paths they fall into, the psychological analyses in our sources offer a really brilliant everyday analogy to explain their intense, almost punishing perfectionism.
The black dot fixation.
Yes. So imagine a vast, pristine white sheet of paper, and that beautiful, expansive white space represents a lifetime of incredible successes, massive achievements, loyal friends, healthy relationships, just general brilliance. Now imagine a single microscopic black dot of ink right in the exact middle of that paper.
To a Jyeshtha native, that single speck of ink ruins the entire sheet.
Completely ruins it.
They possess a profound professional negativity bias. They will completely ignore the vast white space of their successes. It simply does not register to them as important because success is expected. It's the baseline.
Right. They don't celebrate it.
No. Instead, their eye is magnetically drawn to the one thing that is wrong. And they will fixate and obsess over that microscopic black dot of failure or imperfection. It completely overrides the 99 things that are going perfectly right.
I mean, they are the person you absolutely want reviewing the fine print on your mortgage documents because they will find the one missing comma that could cost you thousands.
Oh, for sure.
But they are a total nightmare to watch a mildly inaccurate historical drama with because they cannot enjoy the sweeping cinematography. They're too busy pointing out that the protagonist's boots weren't invented until 50 years after the scene takes place.
Yes. It is a relentless internal standard. And to explain why their nervous system is biologically wired to operate this way, the sources introduce the animal archetype of Jyeshtha, which is the rabbit.
Right, which usually we associate rabbits with springtime, softness, innocence.
But the ancient texts use the rabbit for a very specific biological reason. The rabbit is the only mammal born with its eyes wide open.
Which is wild to think about.
Think about the metaphorical weight of that detail. The Jyeshtha native is born into a state of eyes wide open awareness. They do not get a grace period of blindness or naive trust. They are thrown into the world already scanning the environment for predators.
And the sources actually translate this biological trait into our second everyday analogy, which is a military-grade radar system.
A radar system that simply cannot be powered down. Imagine the dish spinning, pinging, scanning the horizon 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is the Jyeshtha nervous system.
Right.
Because of this, they experience profound, daily sensory overload. The texts note they're especially sensitive to sound, which perfectly mirrors the evolutionary design of the rabbit's large, ever-listening ears.
They're catching frequencies that other people just tune out.
Exactly. And this constant vigilance frequently results in chronic insomnia. Their biology is permanently locked in a fight-or-flight state of defensive mobilization. They can't rest because the radar is constantly finding a new target, a new potential problem, a new black dot to worry about.
But you cannot live with your eyes wide open, constantly scanning for threats without it warping your worldview. I mean, if you're always looking for enemies, that radar eventually starts turning allies into threats.
The shadows start looking like monsters.
Exactly. And this brings us to the darker aspects of the Jyeshtha psychology, specifically what the sources call the traitor complex.
Right. To understand the traitor complex, we have to look directly at the mythology of Indra, the king of the gods, who is the presiding deity of Jyeshtha.
Right, the sovereign of the heavens.
He is the supreme sovereign, but his rule is characterized by profound insecurity. He is never truly comfortable on his throne. In one of the most pivotal myths in these texts, Indra's royal umbrella and his mother's divine earrings are stolen by the demon Narakasura.
And these aren't just pieces of jewelry, right?
No, they are the ultimate symbols of his status, his legitimacy, and his divine protection.
So the king of the heavens actually gets robbed. The highest authority in the cosmic hierarchy has his greatest treasures taken right out from under his nose.
Exactly. And because Jyeshtha translates to the eldest, or the chief, these natives naturally rise to the top of their respective hierarchies. They're the bosses, the founders, the heads of the family.
But because their archetype carries the energetic memory of stories like Indra's, they live in a constant paralyzing fear of being usurped, undermined, or betrayed by their own inner circle.
They feel they must guard their treasures at all times, and that treasure might be their actual wealth, their professional reputation, or their intellectual property. They are perpetually waiting for someone to steal their umbrella.
The top of the hierarchy is just an incredibly lonely, paranoid place to sit. And if you genuinely believe someone is always coming for your crown, you have to control every single variable in your environment to prevent that from happening. Which the sources draw a direct line from this paranoia straight to the control freak persona.
The control freak behavior is purely a defense mechanism. The native uses cold, calculating logic to try and manage chaotic, inherently unpredictable environments.
Right.
They feel that to maintain their status as the eldest, they must always project the image of the strong, invulnerable sovereign. To accomplish this, they aggressively suppress anything they view as a weak emotion. Grief, shame, self-doubt, insecurity, the fear of not being good enough, all of these deeply human experiences are pushed down into the basement of their psyche and locked away.
But the human body is not designed to permanently store suppressed emotion. You can't just swallow your grief and pretend it doesn't exist. It has to go somewhere.
It turns the psyche into an emotional pressure cooker. They are clamping down the lid on their vulnerabilities while simultaneously turning up the heat with their paranoid radar system.
And when that pressure cooker finally breaches its structural limits,
The suppressed vulnerability does not come out as tears or healthy admissions of fear. It erupts as sudden, toxic thunderbolt anger.
wow.
They use anger because anger feels empowering. It mimics the feeling of taking action. It feels like wearing armor. But in reality, it's just a violent explosion of all that tightly compressed anxiety.
So, knowing all of this, the relentless radar, the obsession with the black dot, the deep-seated fear of betrayal, and this pressure cooker of suppressed emotion, where does this energy actually go in the real world? Like in practical terms, where do these people end up functioning in society?
They naturally gravitate toward and excel in roles that require intense guardianship and the active management of crises. The very traits that cause them personal anguish make them phenomenally effective in certain careers.
That makes sense.
You will constantly find them thriving as high-level administrators who have to oversee complex, critical systems where failure is not an option. They make exceptional military leaders, police chiefs, and detectives.
Because in those fields, a natural paranoia and a hypervigilant radar system become massive professional assets. You're literally paid to find the hidden threats that everyone else is ignoring.
Exactly. And the texts also heavily associate this nakshatra with surgeons, which makes perfect sense when you consider the stakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Surgeons are the ultimate manifestation of Jyeshtha energy. They must harness what the astrological texts call the Tikshna nature, an energy that is sharp, dreadful, and capable of cutting through illusions. When a surgeon is operating on a human being, they need to be obsessed with the black dot.
They need to see the one microscopic thing that is wrong, the one bleeding vessel, the one anomaly.
Right, and interestingly, for that same reason, Jyeshtha natives also excel as occult researchers or investigative journalists. They are built to dig beneath the comfortable surface of reality, to uncover the hidden, often uncomfortable truths.
But carrying that weight, living permanently as the sovereign guardian who never sleeps, it exacts a brutal toll. Both sources on medical astrology that we looked at are truly sobering on this point. They map out exactly what happens to a physical body that is locked in a lifelong state of defensive mobilization.
The physical cost of the Jyeshtha archetype is very steep. The mind's relentless radar scanning and the deeply internalized stress of absolute perfectionism directly impact the physical vessel. According to the medical texts, Jyeshtha natives are highly prone to autoimmune issues, chronic inflammation, and severe, unexplained chronic pain.
It's a literal manifestation of their psychology. Their body internalizes the mind's defensive posture.
Yes, the immune system becomes just as hypervigilant as the intellect, and eventually it begins attacking itself because it simply cannot find the external enemy it is so utterly convinced is lurking in the shadows.
The body just mirrors the mind's fight or flight state. The immune system is essentially looking around, finding no demons to fight, and deciding to wage war on its own tissue just to stay busy.
It is a staggeringly heavy burden for the eldest star to carry.
It really forces you to view their intense need for control with a lot more compassion.
It is the heaviest crown in the zodiac. But this brings us to the most vital part of the texts, the integration. How does the Jyeshtha native survive their own brilliant paranoid mind? What is the remedy for this affliction?
Right.
The ultimate talisman, the protective amulet for Jyeshtha, is the exact opposite of what they think it is. It is not more dominance. It is not building thicker armor. It is not tightening their grip on control.
What is the antidote to all that sovereign anxiety then?
It is humility.
Humility, just
Right.
laying down the desperate need to be recognized as the undisputed chief.
Exactly. Humility acts as a literal, energetic cloaking device. Because Jyeshtha natives are naturally brilliant and capable, they inherently attract jealousy, rivalry, and political intrigue.
Of course they do.
When they constantly fight to prove their status, when they boast or demand respect, they light themselves up like a beacon on everyone else's radar. They invite the very attacks they are so afraid of.
But when they practice genuine, quiet humility, they disappear from the crosshairs of their rivals.
Yes, when they stop fighting to prove they are the king and instead step quietly into the role of the wise, unassuming protector, the pressure cooker finally depressurizes. The radar powers down. They fulfill the true, majestic legacy of the eldest star by guiding others without needing the glory or the title.
As we sit here listening to the steady, quiet tick of the clock in Cafe Karma International, it is important to remember that the sources aren't moralizing. We aren't judging the control freak, and we aren't throwing praise at the humble servant.
Right. We're simply observing the pure mechanics of the soul. We are looking at the gears turning beneath the surface of human behavior, charting how a specific frequency of cosmic energy navigates the heavy density of earthly life.
It is entirely about cause and effect.
The action of defensive arrogance creates the reaction of betrayal. The action of humility creates the reaction of safety. It is a mechanical truth, not a moral judgment.
And as we bring this deep dive into the eldest star to a definitive close, there's one final thought we want to leave you with. Something to mull over on your own as you step back out into your day. We've spent our time looking at Indra fighting endlessly to keep his throne, and the Jyeshtha native building impenetrable fortresses to protect their status. But if Jyeshtha's ultimate lesson is finding genuine power through humility and intentionally stepping out of the spotlight, it makes you wonder about the leaders we choose to elevate in our modern society.
It really does.
In our boardrooms, our politics, and our media, are we accidentally rewarding the unhealed paranoia and toxic eruptions of the control freak while completely ignoring the quiet, humble protectors who actually hold the world together? Because maybe the true mark of absolute sovereignty isn't the ability to fiercely guard your kingdom from the outside world, but the courage to finally lay down your weapons and surrender the internal throne of your own ego.